Hi, everyone. Pleasure to get to meet everybody. So Rich Sweeney, one of the lead solutions engineers over here at Restaurant 365. I came from being out in the restaurant space. I was an owner, operator, everything from, kind of mom and pop groups all the way up through some large nationwide organizations. And I was a Radar customer as well as a Restaurant 365 customer before I came on to work for the platform. So I've kind of gotten to see the different sides of the system, the different tools that we have in place. Really trying to figure out what I liked best, what things I've used before, and found ways to maybe make them a little bit better, a little bit easier for myself and my team when we had switched over to Restaurant 365. And so really excited to get to chat with some folks today and discuss kind of the switch, why we think it's a good idea to be moving off of moving off of Radar onto Restaurant 365, as well as kind of discussing, the impact that can have potentially on your businesses.
Great. Hi, everybody.
Um,
Maybe
there's
should
Nick.
I,
There we go.
yeah, introduce myself here. My name is Nick Imbo. I'm a senior finance manager here at Lessing's Hospitality Group. We have been in business for over 130 years now, since 1890. We have about well over 100 locations now, ranging from restaurants to catering locations and food service. So think, cafeterias. We do a lot of high schools as well. So we are, fully integrated in the hospitality space. And my role here is to kind of be that bridge between our accounting operations and our operations team. And I'm one of the two admins we have on the Restaurant 365 accounting platform.
Cool. Thanks for joining us, Nick. I guess kind of before we hop in, what was your experience with Radar? How long were you on it? Kind of let's talk about where you were at, kind of before Restaurant 365.
Sure. So before Restaurant 365, we were on C2 at Radar for about 8 years. We've been legacy C2 at customers since 2014. So that was our first, foray into restaurant management software. That was a big game changer for us as a company, getting off of Excel-based sales reporting from, all of our point of sales, Micros, which was the dominant one back in 2014. We're in the process of moving all of our locations over to Toast still, which has been a huge benefit. But that was our first introduction to C2 at Radar back in 2014.
Okay. And I mean, looking at, obviously 10 years in general, 11 years in general, kind of makes a world of difference, but especially in the restaurant space, I feel like, things stayed stagnant in restaurants for so long. And then kind of we leaned on the gas and really started to go all in on technology. What would you say are, maybe some of the challenges that you see for restaurants having to handle currently, whether that be from technology, for staffing, just I mean, obviously on the financial side, what are some of the things that you're seeing, not necessarily just for you guys, but kind of for restaurants in general?
Yeah, I mean, I would say just the fact that there is so much technology now in the restaurants itself. Um, you know, we went from just having the Micros 3700 system in most of our restaurants to suddenly all these different tech stacks, whether it be the accounting software, the third-party delivery platforms, your marketing platforms as well. So we, initially it was great to get on Radar, but we realized we had all this other data that was coming into that point of sale that we weren't utilizing correctly. So, that was a big benefit for us to get onto Radar, to organize that data and easily manipulate it in a way that we can get it onto our accounting software.
Absolutely. And I think, for me, still when I was in restaurants, third party delivery, was getting more and more and more popular. I worked for a group that we were based up in Los Angeles, and I went into one of the restaurants, and I swear that the kid who was working behind the cash register was like octopus arms. He had all of
Yeah.
this like ring of tablets around him for,
Yeah.
kind of putting in all of the orders. And now being able to see, how those third parties are either directly integrating into the point of sale system or be able to use an aggregator, kind of pull all of those orders together and then feed them in. So really, kind of just leaning into the technology side of things. All of that data needs to go somewhere so that we can see it, report on it, better manage our businesses based off of it. And so really being able to help get that integrated. And then also the other side of that piece is, on the staffing front, being able to have somebody who has the technical ability to do all of these things while still putting orders into, a point of sale system and still delivering great guest service as
Sure.
folks are coming in for their orders. Really trying to find ways for leaning into technology to help on the staffing side, as well. Of course, at the end of the day, making sure that the dollars make sense, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. It was one of those things where, 10 years ago, you have your employees, your servers, your bartenders all on their hot schedules app, still using a, printed out piece of paper for a schedule. And then you have, the guy in front of the point of sale with the DoorDash, Uber Eats tablet, Grubhub tablet, all manually entering that, and then, checking his phone to see when his next shift is, right? So there's a lot of different technology involved.
Absolutely. And I mean, with that, kind of just the changes that we've seen with third party and with tech in general, kind of embracing radar and knowing that you needed to have some reporting tools, some ways of being able to see all of this information that was there. What would you say? I mean, what were some of like the you had radar, you were using it. I know you guys were using a different accounting software. Were you on Sage?
We were on Sage 100. So, antiquated software, not necessarily built for the restaurant industry, that we kind of manipulated in order uh, to do the things we wanted it to do, whether that be accounts receivable, inventory, and just basic general journal entry transactions.
Gotcha. And I guess, with having that separate accounting system and having radar in place, what were some of the, kind of day-to-day pain points that you would run into and having those two separate systems in place?
Yeah, definitely reporting sales was a big challenge for us in the beginning. We connected a Power BI model eventually to see to it Radar that would allow us to, blast out those sale reports daily and weekly to our executive team, to our board. So that was a huge benefit at the time for us. But we realized, every time someone added a new sale department, a new comp, that would suddenly break our reporting in Radar, and we couldn't then rely on our accounting software for that data because it just wasn't in yet, because that's still required an export out of Radar into Sage 100, which is the accounting platform. So that was always about a week delayed at that time. We would bring over sales weekly, after our reconciliations were done, and sometimes that got out a couple weeks to a monthly cadence. So we really didn't have anything to rely um, on a day to day besides Radar for that sale reporting.
Gotcha. And then, I mean, with that, kind of how that's slowing you down, kind of doing things maybe on a weekly basis at best. I mean, were there any other specific processes that maybe just like took too much time or, kind of restaurant folks are always great at finding
Sure.
a way to like work around the problem. I mean, were you guys kind of trying to find your own ways to make things easier or just kind of deal with, kind of pains from radar?
Yeah, one of the big things I can recall using Radar was the payroll reporting as well. Our operators always want to know where they're at, with COGS reporting, labor reporting, food cost percentages. Obviously we process payroll here once a week. So what I would do is I would grab a file from ADP, import that into our accounting software. And then once we had that payroll data in the accounting software, we'd create an export back into Radar to add those actual labor costs, which would zero out any payroll accruals we had in the system, and the hourly payroll we were reporting as well directly from the point of sale. So it was a true up process every week. So it was great to have that data all at once, but suddenly for the office here, it created a lot more work all of a sudden.
Gotcha. I mean, that's the thing too, right? We want to as a former operator, I was always trying to find ways to make it easier for my team, but I also wanted to keep them informed. I wanted them to have the numbers. But kind of knowing on the other end of that, sometimes making it easier for one group is going to make it harder for somebody else, or it just
Sure.
slows things down. It's really trying to find ways that we can really balance between both, kind of front of house and back of house, so to speak.
Hmm.
Accounting and operations, instead of it being that contentious relationship where where everyone's always fighting with each other because
Sure.
things don't match. Really trying to find a way to line things up together. So I guess what was kind of the tipping point? When did you guys, decide that it was time to look at something different? What motivated you to look at 365 and finally say, hey, you know what? I think we've just reached the point where we need to change from radar.
Yeah, sure. I think it came to the point where we wanted this data faster. We wanted the ability to run an ops statement from C2 at Radar, and not have the guesswork for our operators to say, okay, I'm getting my actual P&L from Sage a month later, and I'm looking at my ops statement, right after the period closes, and they're totally different numbers. And that's usually because, a lot of that data from Radar still has to get over to our accounting platform, and we're making decisions in that accounting platform that doesn't necessarily write back to Radar. So, you're an operator looking at your variable expenses from the previous month. All of a sudden, the office is receiving some invoices that maybe not necessarily go back into Radar at that point. So Radar is great in the sense that it was all of our accounts payable. So the operators got to see that data immediately in those AP batches. But they're still waiting a month, sometimes longer, for that actual P&L to come out. So that was when we really decided, we have to look for another solution here to get faster financial reporting out to our company. So we started that process back in 2017, 2018, started looking around. It's when we ran into, C2, it was acquired by Compete at that point, and they had a, pretty robust accounting platform that we were close to pulling the trigger on, but it just wasn't quite ready yet. Because what we wanted to eliminate was that import export, functionality, not having to drop a CSV file out of Sage or out of Radar and into the Compete accounting. So it didn't really look like a step up for us. It was more of a lateral remove. So, and then, fast forward a couple of years, pandemic hits, and then, we were not doing anything in terms of looking to upgrade until, shortly thereafter, where we realized you guys had purchased Compete. So, and we checked out Restaurant365 accounting in the past, and that, suddenly realized this is now possible for us to move over and have an all-in-one solution.
It's kind of funny. That was when Restaurant 365 acquired Compete, was like springtime of 2021, and I came on and joined the company that December. And it was funny when I told my old VP of hospitality that I was going to be leaving the restaurant. They asked where I was going. Typically it's like the chef, like, where are you going? What restaurant are you going to now? And I
Sure.
was like, I'm getting out of operations. I'm going to
Yeah.
make the change. And I told him I was coming to Restaurant 365, and he like pulled me into his office and was like, "Are they taking away Radar? What's going on? Like, you got to tell me." I was like, "I haven't even started working at the company yet." So no, 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 we're not taking away
Yeah.
Radar from everybody. And Radar is an amazing product. Like, part of the reason why I came onto Restaurant 365 was that I, had used Radar in the past, and I had used Restaurant 365. And then when I was working in the restaurant and I wanted to get out of operations and move into technology, for me, it was like, well, I didn't necessarily want to go work for a point of sale system, but I wanted to do something that I was kind of familiar with. And I was looking into, openings at Restaurant 365. I was looking into things at Compete, kind of like trying to look around. And then I realized that all the things I looked at Compete pointed me back towards Restaurant 365. Now I was like, oh wait, they just acquired them, and I was like, cool, because I really liked using that tool as well, and got to kind of start some conversations, and found my way, kind of moving out of the restaurant space over to here. But I really did love that, before I had even left the restaurant, my old boss was trying to get me to give him like insider info that I had no clue about yet.
Yeah.
So I guess with that, kind of making the, obviously you guys had started 2017 at looking at, different options, things like that. Fast forward, looking at Restaurant 365 some more. What were some of the things that made Restaurant 365 stand out when you were looking for, kind of a new solution for accounting, for operations, just everything in general?
Sure. I think we looked at a couple of options. It really came down to two. It was Restaurant 365 and Sage Intacct that we were looking at. Sage Intacct, it's a great accounting platform, but not necessarily hospitality focused, compared to Restaurant 365. What we loved about R365 was the ability to connect all of our point of sales, similar to Radar, right into the accounting platform. So suddenly we're not using Radar as that middleman. We're importing that POS data directly into Restaurant 365, and that's creating the journal entry right there for us, which suddenly gives us a bunch of different options to do, to use that data for financial reporting, for COGS reporting, purchase history, vendor data. So it was really an easy decision for us to make to move over to R365, especially since you guys had acquired C2 at Radar at that point.
Awesome. And I guess what was your experience like doing that onboarding, kind of doing that migration process, coming off of multiple other systems, coming onto Restaurant 365? Kind of what was your vantage point? How did all of that go? What was your experience like?
Yeah, so it was about a year-long process for us. I think we started that onboarding in March of 2023, and we have 7 legal entities here at Lessings. So we started with a couple of smaller legal entities that had 1 or 2 locations in them, onboarded them fully into Restaurant 365 by October of that same year. Just training everyone in the office on the new accounting platform, understanding how it worked, and then then again training our operators on it. And we kind of took a staggered approach thereafter, and we were fully onboarded into the system by February of 24, and that's when we made our full accounting cutover. So we did have some flexibility with smaller legal entities to kind of understand how this process would work for us, but it was mostly smooth. The teams we worked with at Restaurant 365 on the accounting and operations side were hugely beneficial. We still, talk to them to this day, which is great. But yeah, it was a big learning experience for us, just because, like I said, this company is over 130 years old, and I think throughout our history we only made 3 or 4 accounting software changes. So it was understanding how we were structured on our back end, and making changes to pretty much modernize us into a new cloud-based platform.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize this, but our implementation teams, they're all folks that are coming from the restaurant space. So when we're looking at operations coaches, when we're looking at accounting coaches, on the accounting side, they've all been, either bookkeepers or CPAs or something in finance specifically tied back to restaurants. And on the operations side, I think almost all of them have been either a GM or there's a good chunk. I think it's probably like 80% or more of them have been that above GM, multi-unit role, and now have shifted into, kind of working as part of our implementation team. So these are people who, they understand what you're doing. It's not like somebody, just read up on how to do, accounting for idiots online
Right.
and came on to try to teach people how to use the platform. These are folks that understand it. They also understand the challenges of restaurant life and working in the
Sure.
operations, to really just make sure that they're helping you get set up. There was something when you had mentioned when we talked the other day, that you were saying it was kind of like a little bit freeing for you, kind of like being able to clean some things up. I think you were saying like starting fresh, getting rid of a lot of the old clutter
Sure.
in Radar before you came over. I guess what were some of those things like? Was it stuff that you just didn't realize you guys had stored in there, or just duplicates of things? I guess it's how did all of that stuff come about?
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned that, and it's kind of a two-pronged approach here, right? On the accounting side, with Sage, we had a lot of, and just this is just because of the way Sage was structured with general ledger accounts. There were probably thousands of general ledger accounts that we suddenly realized we can condense down to just a few hundred, because we don't need a food cost GL with a string that had a location number, a division number, and a company number at the end of it. It was just a general ledger account and our location. So immediately that was a huge data savings for us. All of a sudden we can condense these. And on the flip side, on the operations side, we did make the mistake early on in the C2 at Radar days of giving our general managers and anyone that worked on the store level access to the inventory items. So they were able to create inventory items, create vendor purchase items. So all of a sudden we had over 12,000 inventory items in Radar, when in reality we knew that number to be probably closer to 5 or 6,000. So that was an immediate benefit for us to clean that up and condense those items. So that was probably the longest thing we did during implementation. That took the most time for us, just because you kind of just got to lock people in a room and say, okay, how are we condensing? We have 30 different types of chicken wings, but at the end of the day, it's just a chicken wing, right? So that was a huge benefit to us as well. And it's like you said earlier, one of the big assets you guys provided us was that you do have that restaurant experience. You are hospitality focused. So immediately we're all speaking the same language. And that was a huge benefit for us.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about like my time with Radar, and just having the ability to go in and create new vendor purchase items and kind of map things in, stuff like that. And just the number of times that I would be doing inventory and early in the morning, giant can of some kind of insane energy drink to keep me alive while I'm in the freezer counting stuff. And then I'm like looking at my sheets and I'm like, I don't know, why is this here? Like, kind of trying to figure out why things were the way they were.
Yeah.
But then also going to the back office and going, well, wait a minute, what is this? This isn't adding up right. The cost doesn't look right. And then I'd get like little messages from my director of hospitality of asking me like, what is this? And like she would just kind of have like this little tiny snippet of a line item. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And it was she was trying to create VPIs and map them back to items, but she was linking the
Sure.
wrong things.
Yep.
Because she wasn't in the day-to-day operation in the kitchen. She was, kind of more guest facing. And I was back in the kitchen side of things, and everybody else had access to create those new items. And so we would just have this massive database full of stuff that like all pointed in the wrong direction.
Yep.
And then you'd run your numbers and you're like, I don't know why this doesn't look right. So like, kind of trying to clean that up as well as I mean, when I was first starting to do it, it was just kind of like trial by fire of like, well, here you fix it, and then trying to go in and clean up a database. I didn't know where to start. When I came over to Restaurant 365, it was really nice to be able to see like the ease of being able to create those things as well as putting parameters behind it for other people. Like you can link an item, but you can't create an item.
Sure.
Just kind of some of those security settings that are, I think, a little bit more robust than what we had over in Radar, but just
Hmm.
also gives you a better end user experience for the person who's going to be, counting the inventory at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing, condensing the data I was talking about, coming from Sage, we had a vendor for each location, even though it was, US foods. We had, probably 20 different US food vendors because each location had its own vendor. So immediately that was a huge savings for us. Coming into Restaurant 365, there's just one US food vendor. So immediately those items are not in the wrong place. They're all in US food, not, the wrong vendor for the US food vendor based on the location.
Absolutely. And I think kind of, now that you guys have been on the platform now fully for a little over a year, are there any specific areas of the business that you think you've seen improvements in now that you've made the switch over to Restaurant 365 and gotten some time on the system?
Oh, absolutely. Right off the bat, those first few locations, those restaurants that we onboarded, we saw probably an average of 2% food cost drop immediately, just because we had a clean inventory, fresh items, and we were counting correctly, which in turn lets the operators order smarter using the purchase order tool in Restaurant 365 and coming up with that theoretical cost right away. Um, it helped on labor as well and in forecasting with the smart forecasting. So we saw immediate benefits in those COGS and the prime cost number right away. Just to give our operators better visibility into the expenses on a day-to-day basis and especially week to week. That data was available at their fingertips much faster. I always tell our guys, we're seeing what you see now. You're not waiting for us to provide that report at the end of the week. You can just dive into the system and check those cogs and drill into them as well to see, okay, all these expenses are coming from this vendor and it's neatly outlined for them.
Yeah, and I think that drill down is something, a little bit. I'll kind of hop into the platform. We can kind of poke around and show some things off, but
Sure.
that drill down ability I think is great for being able to see, like you said, not only accounting and operations looking at the same information. We're not having to worry about disparate systems and did we update in one but not in the other. Everybody's looking at the same things. But
Mhm.
then, like if I'm an operator and I see that my food cost number seems high, well, why is that high? And I want to drill into it and I want to be able to see will show me, everything that came back from food cost. And it's got all of my purchases and inventory counts and waste logs and transfers, and I can go into an individual invoice and see the line items and the distribution. It's like, oh, hey, actually, you know what? Somebody, looked at this invoice, they put it in the wrong way. We got this as an each instead of a case or vice versa,
Sure.
and catching some of those things instead of just sitting here going, well, I don't know why the numbers aren't right and trying to rip my hair out and trace it back the other way. Instead, I found it to be really intuitive for trying to help troubleshoot issues and problems as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely demystified the entire accounting process for our operators. That it's a great teaching tool to show them, what this means, what that inventory adjustment means at the end of the week. Uh, so they can, it was really a learning moment for them as well.
Yeah, and I think from talking to some other customers as well, one thing I was like finding out from people who've gone through the migration process is, how have things changed? How have things improved? I was talking to somebody else, and they were saying that it used to be before their end of week. Kind of they ended their week on Monday, and then Tuesday was the start of the week, and Tuesday was the GM's day to like be locked in the office, or
Yeah,
working at a table somewhere, either in the dining room or back in the kitchen, kind of trying to squirrel away just to get all of their admin work done,
sure.
the way that we had it set up, kind of on older systems. And I say we because I've worked for plenty of those places where
Yeah.
the GM was locked in the office on inventory day and
Yep.
kind of closing out each week. But for so many people now, it's like the information going in automatically, the ability for them to be able to review those numbers operationally and kind of keep a better finger on the pulse of the business means that they're not having to do that for a full day, and it means that they get to get out of the office, go back to the floor, go back to the guests, go back to the team, and really make
Exactly.
people feel like they're working together. From your vantage point as well, I mean, operationally, I'm sure you've seen that, but also like on the accounting side of things, is that how has making that switch over helped your team, kind of recoup time, kind of do better deep dives on numbers? I guess what's that look like for you guys?
Yeah, no doubt. And the biggest time savings for those managers on the store level, and which I've, who I spend a lot of time with in my role, they're no longer, manually plugging away invoice data into Radar, right? In the past, if we didn't have an EDI feed set up, that they were manually inputting that invoice, line iteming the detail, which takes time. You're on the desk with a stack of invoices, manually doing each one. That's a few hours each morning they were spending doing that. With R365, all they're doing is snapping a photo of that invoice, going directly to the docs to process team, and that gets line itemed exactly how we need it. So that was a huge, huge time savings for them.
Awesome. And then I mean, kind of on either side of the fence, have you guys found like any benefit as far as like the ability to build workflows, kind of like, sometimes I feel like when you sign into these systems, if you don't have like a framework built out, you just kind of jump in and everything's in front of you and you get a little bit overwhelmed. We have like in Restaurant 365, we have like kind of the to-do checklist that'll pop up,
Sure.
but also kind of like, the ability to have a workflow. Like I'm receiving the invoice, but who needs to review it? Who needs to approve it? And then
Yep.
if it goes above a certain dollar amount, who else needs to put eyes on it? Have you guys seen that there's been some benefit there as well for kind of automating that? But more so like just making sure that the right sets of eyes are getting to see the right things in a timely manner.
Yes, absolutely. And that was another reason we jumped onto this platform. Probably around 2016, 2017, maybe a little later than that, we did start utilizing Plate IQ for AP automation. So that was just another system for our accounting office and our operators to go into, and just more work for on my end to get data out of Plate IQ and then into our accounting software. So, going back to before we were on R365, that was suddenly three different tech platforms that required an export to our accounting platform. So with jumping into R365, that's something we really diligently went through in the implementation process, is to build out these workflows. Okay, we have this food vendor, this needs to get its eyes on by our head chef, and then to our general manager for final approval. We can set thresholds. If it's over $5,000, that's going to go to an area manager. If it's a service and maintenance type related invoice, that would go to our maintenance team as well for approval. So it really gave us that all-in-one, everything under one roof ability to easily process invoices at a much faster rate than we were doing. It's you're not walking around the office with an invoice, leaving it on someone's desk. Hey, can you approve this? And then it gets lost, and then suddenly the vendor is looking for payment. Gets rid of all of that. So it's a exponential time savings, really.
Absolutely. I think too, you brought up Plate IQ, and that my last restaurant group that I was with, we used Plate IQ and Radar. We didn't have Restaurant 365's accounting because we were part of a larger brewery organization. And so they had other systems that they used. And so, I would take everything, put it through Plate IQ, and then I would push it into Radar and then create the batches and things like that. And then, I'd post my batch, and then the accounting
Yeah.
team picks everything up. My When I was there, my last last 6 months that I was there, we were closing out, I think, like the third quarter, and I looked at my numbers because they came to me at like maybe 8, 9 o'clock at night. I had a meeting at 8 o'clock the next morning where I've got to defend my P&L, and realized that like I was a good chef. My food cost numbers were way too good, there. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. And I'm like I'm like, this just doesn't seem right. And then I'm going back into Radar and I'm trying to pull up where I'm looking and I'm messaging my accounting team and I'm saying like, hey, I don't think these numbers are right. And, at the end of the day, it's like, this is what the accounting team is saying. So this is what we've got to go by. And something just doesn't feel right. And we ended up spending, I think it was probably like 4 or 5 days, multiple hours each day. And this is when I'm running a kitchen, multiple hours each day going back and forth with them for me to pull up invoices and batches of invoices and get it to them and kind of try to see where the discrepancy was. And in the changeover process, when they exported data out of Radar, their accounting system had, kind of looked at the date that it was brought in, and they didn't update it to the date that I had the batch of invoices. And so this was
Yeah,
$35,000 worth of invoices that just got,
sure.
written to the wrong period, which made my numbers look really good for that month, but then was just going to kind of screw me over, moving forward. And so that's where I think too, for me, coming over to Restaurant 365 and everybody seeing everything together, really, really made it more important, because then that way I didn't have to worry about, was there a clerical error that's going to cost, not only myself, but my entire team, potentially from getting their bonuses. For
Sure.
operators, you want them to be able to see their numbers, to kind of have access to where am I at now, not just 2 weeks after the end of the period at 8 o'clock at night when you've got 12 hours to read over your financials and defend them, but to be able to really look at it more proactively. How do I see the numbers and how do I make good decisions for the business? Because selfishly, I was bonused off of those things, so I knew I wanted to make sure I was making money for the business, because that turned into money for me, but also just kind of making sure that I was being a better operator and teaching the rest of my team how to read those reports, how to understand it on a more regular basis, instead of, well, let's just look at this financial statement that we can't drill into, we can't see where the numbers came from. Really having something that's a little bit more robust definitely came
Absolutely.
in it came in handy. As far as like your managers and your team, I mean, have they given you any feedback, either operationally, on the accounting side, as far as what they, like about Restaurant 365, things that maybe are a little bit easier or better for them on their day-to-day operations as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the forecasting has been a big hit on the operations side, especially the smart forecasting feature, where it uses the algorithms to come up with a sales forecast for the week, and giving them the direct ability to tweak that forecast based on what it be weather, known events coming up that they doing a okay, we have a bridal shower on Saturday, we're going to up that sale forecast by a couple thousand, we know that's coming in, and being able to directly forecast, I'm sorry, schedule off of that forecast. It's one click. As soon as you publish that forecast, takes you directly to that scheduler. So you can get a true theoretical labor cost right off the bat, which you could do on See to It, but with their forecasting, it didn't quite talk to each other as well as Restaurant 365's does. And I'd say the other big thing for us was our operators love using that feature for forecasting, but it suddenly just came to it just became too much work to kind of look at one piece of data and then compare that to the other, your actual schedule. So that was a huge time savings. But I'd say, we don't really hear much of the benefits from them. If it's quiet on their end, it usually means that they're doing well. They don't really need us. We only really hear, when there's a problem. So that's yeah,
Awesome. I mean, I have to at least throw this up here to show everybody, only because, in my mind, when I came on to Restaurant 365, and when I was using Radar, you can't tell me that the Radar scheduler was prettier than this guy, and that it was an easy one to work with. I used a lot of different scheduling platforms in my time, and the Radar one was, for whatever reason, the one that always made me want to rip my hair out the most. So
sure.
being able to switch over to something that was a little bit easier to navigate, easier to sort, and kind of see what I wanted to do. Set kind of different rules and things like that, and then also make it easy for my staff. From the mobile app to update their availability or request time off, and kind of I didn't have to go back to the office to handle those things. I could have my phone on me and be able to, kind of approve requests or see if somebody else has already requested that same day off that I haven't gotten a chance to approve yet, shift swaps, things like that. So really just trying to help make it a little bit easier for folks to be able to see some of that stuff. And to
Yeah,
your point that you were mentioning, kind of looking at sales forecasting numbers that live inside of the scheduler, helping me see how I'm doing for the week compared to what I had forecasted, really helping give operators more of that information, kind of without having to run a ton of different reports. They're just in the platform and able to see some of those things.
sure. Yeah, the visibility here is just unmatched. It gives them that just that snapshot they need to see what those projected sales are and that labor cost.
Absolutely. And I think before, you were mentioning with Restaurant 365 being able to, instead of using Radar as kind of the bridge to get information from the POS and then put it into, Sage, instead being able to have that direct connection with the point of sale system where, we're able to integrate in with, I think we're somewhere around 130 different point of sale systems now that we can directly integrate with. We can pull multiple point of sales into the same database for users in case you do have different POS that are in place. But for managers, being able to have that quick snapshot in the daily sales summary of data that's coming over from the POS, so you're not having to worry about somebody keying it in. Did they put it in the right way? Is there mistakes? Looking at those sales numbers, looking at labor, but then being able to really drill into it and see, who worked yesterday, how much time did they work? Be able to look for, did everybody take their breaks, things like that.
Yep,
All just tracking all of that kind of stuff at the store level to make it really simple and easy. Plus my manager log notes are connected, having the ability to managers can put in notes on the app and then have it flow into not only the manager log, but the daily sales side of things. And then on the back end of it, being able to have all of my daily sales coming into the system automatically every day. And then, being able to go in, looking at it from that back office perspective. I want to be able to see information. I want to maybe look at it how my GMs are seeing it just to make sure that they're not missing anything as well. But now I've just got that, next level of detail inside the back office and that journal entry so that I can look to see, everything that's coming over from the POS, how it's being mapped into Restaurant 365. If I need, here I've got a new sales account that I have to map something to, I can do that directly from here. So I'm not having to, kind of do it in different places in the system and then
yep,
refresh it and, kind of have it all come together. Instead, really being able to have all of those things tie into one place. For me, this was one of those things that just made it a lot easier. Um,
totally.
and then I would, imagine as well on the accounting side of things, being able to have this, kind of this journal entry that's created automatically. Anybody who's an accountant, I just throw this out there so I don't offend or upset anyone. It's created automatically, but you still control the numbers. You still approve things into the system. We're just trying to get rid of that data entry and really try to make it as easy as possible with the 365 platform.
Absolutely. This has been a huge benefit for us in the accounting office as well. Radar was great for a lot of things, and uh, having that the GL sales export that we utilized in Radar was great, but it still gave you the ability to manipulate the data coming out of Radar. And with this, you're getting that raw POS data right away and understanding how that's mapping to your general ledger.
Absolutely. And then, kind of taking it that next step further of we're creating those journal entries that are happening here. Now we want to be able to, empower our operators by getting them, reporting, getting them an operations statement so that they can see right now throughout the course of the month, how they're doing, how they're performing week over week, see how they're doing compared to budget, compared to prior, and then being able to drill into things as well. So like as an operator, if I'm looking at this and I see like, hey, why are some of these numbers a little bit higher than what they are before? Like we're spending, significantly more money on groceries this week than my other weeks. Well, if I want to see where that number came from, I can go into it, and now it's going to pull up, what invoice contributed to that cost. I can go into that, next step further and really be able to see like what items actually came in. Maybe we just placed a really big order because we've got something going on, but this is giving me the ability to go from, financial report down to line item detail, not only for like one location, but we can, look at this for multiple locations as far as like consolidated financial report. Let me see my multiple restaurants consolidated down. Let me look at these same three restaurants and line them up, side by side, so I can see how they're all doing compared to each other, and then being able to drill down into it as well. For when I was multi-unit and we were using Restaurant 365, this was a great way for me to know, throughout the course of the month, how are my locations performing, and who do I have to go spend some more time with, because maybe their
Sure.
food cost is a little bit higher, their labor cost is out of whack, something like that. So really just trying to, make it easy for folks to be able to access that information as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing our operators love about Restaurant 365 on the invoicing side is that ability to put that credit expected right on the invoice screen itself. So they're no longer, telling us, oh, well, we have all these returns on this invoice, so I know I'm getting that credit in a week or two. Right away using that field, that's letting them realize the food cost right away, and we'll move that, debit to a balance sheet account. So when that credit does come in from the vendor, we can easily tie it out on our end, so we can give the operators a better sense of where their food cost is really at.
Absolutely. And I mean, for me in operations, it was like, the driver already left, or we did a dark drop, and then I'm, maybe something's coming in, we're really busy, don't catch that something's wrong, and then I've got to call the rep, and then the rep's got to call customer support. Customer support has to, put in the credit request and the pickup, and now you've gone through this whole process, and you get, CM 37694 for $283, and nobody knows what it's from or what it's
Yeah,
for, where to apply it. Instead here being able to, kind of put it in like, hey, I got shorted on something, I'm putting that in here, I'm putting in why I got shorted on it.
yeah,
Even the ability then to use this to send that credit request to your rep. So that way, maybe they did already, put in the request, but now you're kind of creating that paper trail so that you can show, hey, no, we re-requested these things. But then also for me, it was that bridge to accounting. So it's like, hey, you guys know that I'm asking for this request. So when it comes in, you'll know where to apply it, things like that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It gives us a leg to stand on with our vendors when we say we're expecting a credit, especially because we are having our locations, even if it's an EDI invoice, we're still having them input that physical invoice copy where they'll cross out a line item and initial it and say, hey, this is from the driver. We are expecting this, this $100 credit because the eggs were cracked or something like that, right? So it gives us more of that documentation to deal with the vendors, on a timely basis.
Absolutely. And especially, with the way eggs are these days, you don't
Yeah,
want to not be getting credit for things like that, making sure that
absolutely.
we're watching everything that's going in and out. I guess inside of Radar, or just kind of inside of the platform, or excuse me, inside of Restaurant 365 compared to when you were using Radar. Anything else that kind of you think really stands out as like something that makes your life easier, that you've seen a bigger benefit compared to Radar, that potentially we could, kind of flash up here to show somebody?
Yeah, I think like you've shown that DSS, I always when we're onboarding our operators to the platform, I always compare that to that. It's kind of like an interactive POS sales report on the Radar side, right? It requires their approval. They have to go through the steps to complete in order to approve that day. So I know when my general manager at one of our restaurants puts his stamp of approval on that, okay, he's checked that. He knows he's checked his Toast POS report. It's matching, right? And that he inputs his deposit data, approves that day, which then goes to our accounting approval. And then that matches right off to our bank activity. So he's making that deposit, and we see that deposit in the bank. It's automatically doing that reconciliation for us. So that's a huge benefit for us and him on the accounting side, knowing that money's in the bank and we've tied that out correctly.
Awesome. I love that. I know we're kind of starting to wind down on time. I wanted to ask, kind of for you, kind of speaking to the other folks that are on here, what are kind of like final thoughts that you think, you would recommend to anybody who's here about why they should consider upgrading from the Radar side of things over to Restaurant 365, as well as potentially bringing, their accounting from another platform onto Restaurant 365?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the benefit of having everything under one roof cannot be overstated enough. The time savings we get from that from all employees in the business is huge. Suddenly, our accounting staff in the office is no longer, waiting for data to come in. It's all real time. So suddenly, we're getting better vendor data, better sales data. and we're reconciling faster. So we're not waiting 3 weeks after a month end to reconcile those credit card batches. It's all being done on a daily basis. So suddenly we have all this time for people to, do other things as well. So, I think one of the concerns was, with more automation comes, less jobs, but we found that those jobs are still needed. We're just applying them better elsewhere. So that's a huge savings for us as well. Um, I'd say the just eliminating that import export. It's getting rid of mistakes, like you said earlier with Plate IQ. Sometimes you realize you missed a week of data just because you accidentally clicked export. So Plate IQ thinks it's already on the accounting platform, but in reality, it's not. So it eliminates all those mazes you jump through as an accountant to go figure out where the chain broke in that link. You're reducing the amount of errors that can come in to the system.
In a world full of easy mistakes that happen, on accident, something just hits the wrong thing or a fat finger moment, kind of miss a
Yeah,
decimal place or something like that. It's good to be able to take all of those extra little distractions out of the way without really worrying about, kind of flubbing up the numbers, all of
sure.
that.
Yeah, and I'd say,
Cool.
it's just, yeah. And last thing I'd say is it's improved communication between our accounting office and our operations team, pretty much from that DSS, right? Something new happens on the point of sale that has to get mapped somewhere. So we're immediately seeing that, addressing it when a GM or an AGM can remember it. It's not 4 weeks later where they said, "Hey, do you remember this new comp you added?" Oh, I have no idea what that was for. So you're squashing those bugs as they come up rather than leaving them for to be addressed later.
Absolutely, making it timely, making it so that everybody's on the same page, and that there's, really eliminating the animosity that can happen between, kind of both sides of it, and everybody's working, towards the same end goal together.
Sure. Of
Awesome, Nick. I thank you for coming on and chatting with me today. Thank you for
course.
for being a Restaurant 365 customer. I'm sure inevitably we'll probably chat again some more when we're trying to talk to some folks that are looking to come over and want to talk to a reference who really sees some really great things with Restaurant 365. So I appreciate you making all the time to join us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much, Rich and Nick. My voice is going to pop in here, if not my face, but that was an incredible discussion. I can't even count on all of my fingers and toes, like how many valuable insights you both shared. We do want to hear from you, our participants and our guests. I'm going to launch a little poll. You let me know if you'd like to learn more about Restaurant 365 and how that upgrade could impact your operations. We'd love to chat with you further.
Yeah, and just so you know, if you are a Radar customer, you are interested in coming over to 365, you may be stuck having a chat with me again. As one of the former Radar folks who works on the solutions engineering team, I love to get to come in and talk to people, find out some of the things that you love about Radar, and you want to see that we can reproduce them inside of Restaurant 365. But also just make sure that there's answer questions for you and kind of show you some of the things that maybe might be a pain in the butt for you in Radar, and how we might be able to make it a little bit easier for you on the R365 side.
While you guys are filling out that poll, I'm just going to share my screen one last time before we go. We definitely want to invite you to connect with Rich and all of us in person at one of our restaurant transformation tour events in 2025. We're bringing together top restaurant leaders for hands-on learning, networking, more expert insights. You can find us at New Orleans. We're actually going to be there this month and in about 10 days. We'll be in Dallas in June, New York City later in December. And then, of course, our massive, biggest customer event of the year is happening this time in San Diego. So it is an experience you do not want to miss. Go ahead and scan that QR code for more details. And you can purchase tickets as well as potentially there are hotel, not hospital, but who knows after these events, right? But hotel discounts. We've got some rooms blocked at all of our events. So thanks again for joining us. We are going to be chatting with you. Thank you so much for those of you who want to learn more. We're excited and we will be in touch. If you have any questions or feedback, always feel free to reach out, marketing@restaurant365.com. Let us know what other webinars you'd like to see, what other guests topics you'd like to have. And thank you again, Rich and Nick. Really appreciate all the insights you shared with us today.
Of course.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Nick, for coming on. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Hopefully, we will see you at another webinar soon. Hop on a demo, be able to show you the platform. And whatever you got going on, hopefully you have a great rest of your day. Appreciate you all making the time for us.
Thanks, guys.